So that Samaritan woman became so excited about the things that Jesus had said that she ran off to the city to tell people what he had said. She went and she told people about Jesus, and I guess, we hear that we're supposed to do that too. And when we lived in Fort Wayne, I had a neighbor who really believed that. She lived across the street and down a couple houses. And she had a neighbor behind her, their yards came together, that didn't go to church. So every time she saw that neighbor out in her yard, she would go out and she would tell her about Jesus and how she had to believe in Jesus or she was going to go to hell, and that whole fundamentalist thing. So the neighbor put up a privacy fence so she wouldn't have to listen to her. Is that the kind of thing we need to do? I know that we need to let other people know about Jesus. And the woman at the well went in and she told the people about Jesus. She told them that he had told her everything that she had done. But I think that that actions speak louder than words, that our lives are more effective than the words that we can speak. When we show that loving kindness that Jesus had, when we show the peace, the joy that he gives us, when we show the forgiveness that we are taught to give to everyone, all of those things that Jesus taught us, when those become active in our lives, when we are gripped by that, and sinners though we are, we live that life, I think that has a much deeper effect on people. I have 3 stories to tell you, and I can't remember what the first one was. But I do have my notes. Oh, yeah, we were at Youth Encounter one time, where Youth Encounter is kind of a thing of the past now, but we used to have like 700 or 800 kids there, and high school kids. And so one of the things that they did was they had a talent show, and we went to the talent show, and this young woman got up. She was a high school student, and she was going to sing the national anthem. And so she started out, the reason I have my notes here is so that I don't get mixed up on what she said. She started out, "Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air." And she stopped because she realized she had left out a whole big section of the anthem. And she tried to remember what it was, and she stood there in front of these hundreds of people trying to remember what words she had left out. And her youth group was over there, and they were not doing anything to help her. And she became more and more anxious, and you could see her wanting, not knowing what to do, but wanting to do something. And all of a sudden, the low, gentle voice of Jesus came from somewhere in the crowd. "Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming? Whose broad stripes?" And at this point, the young woman joined in, and she began to sing. She kept making mistakes, but she hung with it. And bright stars through the perilous fight over the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and by this time other voices had joined in, not loudly, but just quietly and sweetly. And they carried this woman to the end of the song. And as soon as the song ended, the crowd broke into an applause and cheers, and the young woman went off the stage into the arms of her youth group and her youth sponsor. Jesus spoke that day. Jesus comes to dwell in his people, and Jesus speaks through us. Simple act. In the world, she would have been rejected, probably made fun of. People would have wondered why she ever got up on that stage in the first place. But here, in the crowd of Jesus' followers, she was accepted and helped. It was a young couple who had an apartment at one of our state schools, state universities. And there were quite a few students that they knew from high school who were also students at this university. They didn't go to church very often, although they were raised in the church. And so one day they decided that on Saturdays they would get up and they would clean the apartment, then they would go to the grocery store and buy food, and they would prepare things. And then on Sunday, their door was open to anyone who wanted to come. So very often, the students that they knew from high school would come. Sometimes they brought friends, sometimes they didn't. But one day in particular, one of the students came and he brought his girlfriend, who was a Christian. And she wore Christian t-shirts. And she didn't try to save souls, but she talked about her religion and her faith and about Jesus. And there also was in the group another one of their classmates who was an atheist. Her name was Christina. And Christina listened to this Jesus talk for about so long, and then she got fed up, and so she went to this gal and she told her what she thought of her. She called her names, she belittled her, she just really let her have it. So later the couple took her aside and they said, Christina, this is not how we act. This is a safe place. When people come here, they're not attacked. So you don't attack people here. And so they continued to have this open house on Sundays, and people would come and go. Well, there's another story about Christina, the atheist. Christina graduated from college, and she became the head librarian at a big library in Indianapolis. She had one of the women who worked for her didn't dress very well, pretty much inappropriately. She didn't do anything with her hair or her makeup. And her co-workers noticed this, of course, and first they talked about her behind her back, and then they began to make snide remarks to her, and then they were calling her names, and so Christina became aware of this, and so she called her staff together, except for this one young woman, and she said, look, this is not appropriate. This will not be tolerated here. You will not talk about other people. You will not make snide remarks. You will not call them names. And if that happens at all, you'll be fired on the spot. But it didn't stop there. She dismissed the staff, but then she went to the young woman and she talked to her about clothing and about what would be appropriate and what would look good on her. She talked to her about her hair and how she could style it, about makeup and how she could wear it. She took her under her wing, and over the months she guided her until she became a person who was acceptable to the group. You see, what happened in a college apartment where people stood up for the standards of Jesus translated into an atheist doing Jesus work in the world. The woman at the well used words. She went to the city and she told the people what had happened to her. But you don't always have to use words. Actions speak louder than words. We can proclaim the gospel with our lives. We can let other people know about Jesus by the way we live, which is much more effective. I think of the people who claim to be Christians that I've known in the past whose lives were a mess. You know, the woman that tried to convert her neighbor and had the privacy fence cut her off. Her life was not one that I would want. I think St. Francis said it all when he said, proclaim the gospel daily. When necessary, use words. Amen.